Welcome to Beyond the Breakwater, where just beyond the crashing waves of fear, discomfort, and doubt lies the greatest potential for life transformation. We want to guide you into the open waters where the calculated risk you take becomes the turning point for you or your organization to thrive. So draw up your anchors and prepare for departure in this week's episode of Beyond the Breakwater.
Welcome back, everybody. We are really glad you're here. This is our 63rd episode, and my name is Ed, and I'm here with Lyndsay. And if you've been listening along, it's a little bit odd for me to be starting out instead of Lyndsay, but there's a reason for it. This is a really special day. Just a reminder, this is Beyond the Breakwater podcast, and just for those who maybe are new, most churches tend to kind of hang out in the harbor. And we keep encouraging them to get out beyond the breakwater because that's where people who don't know Christ are. And Lyndsay, you had an amazing night last night with a new experience and a new ministry. And I don't know anything about it. You told me you're not going to tell me anything until we get to the podcast. So I'm dying to hear about how last night went. So why don't we just start out and tell us, what was last night about?
So last night was a meeting with a group of young adults. It was our first ever attempt at creating a space for young adults to interact here in Midland and kind of connect with one another with no agenda, just kind of starting things up and building community. And so last night was our first ever. We had like a popcorn bar. We had everybody bring toppings. We did board games, and then we went and played yard games. So, I mean, that's kind of like the short of it, but where do you want to go from here?
Well, I want to go back first because this is something that I know we've talked for a long time. I think ever since you've been here, you've been in Midland for a couple of years, and we've been talking about, you've been talking about your desire to do this. So take us back. It's been hard to accomplish this. Maybe walk us through the what and why.
I'll start with the why. So I was living in Grand Rapids at the time. I was working in HR and recruiting. And then I spent a lot of time at my church, and we had a young adults group there. And it was more like early college, it felt like. So then at this point in my life, like I had graduated from college, was working in a career for a couple of years, and I signed up to be in a small group at my church. And they were like, we don't know what to do with you because we don't really have a place that we can place you. We have a lot of like married groups and family groups, and you just like don't fit in anywhere. And so me and my friend had both signed up to do something. And so they ended up just like pairing the two of us together and sticking us in like a married small group. And so it was...
Which one doesn't belong?
Yes. So it was really, it was great. I really loved just like the wisdom of learning from people there. But all of the people in our group, like they were all married with kids. And we found that like it would come time for small group. Also keep in mind, this is pandemic time. So we were meeting over Zoom for a while. We then like transitioned to in person. And it was like this new dynamic of people remembering that they had stuff on their calendar. And it wasn't yet like cemented in like the routine thing you always do. Yeah. And so it would come around to our bi-weekly small group that would meet. So you're only meeting like twice a month, and someone would be like, oh, darn it, I forgot we had this, forgot to get a sitter for the kids. And then everyone else was like, oh, shoot, we did too. Yeah, we're not coming tonight. And like me and my one other like friend that were in this group that were just like single young adults, we were like, oh, we wanted to do this. And so it just felt like every time it was canceled. And then it was like we would maybe see each other once a month. Yeah. Sometimes we wouldn't see each other at all. And I just felt like me and my friend Shayla, we had all of this time. Like we were like ready to go. We were available like every single night of the week. We could drop anything, do anything. And we were just like ready to go and engage with one another. And we longed for that community so deeply. And I just thought like, this is such a unique season of life that we are not going to get back. It's such a unique season where we don't have responsibilities. We don't have to worry about getting babysitters. Like we can just do something at the drop of a hat. And like, what better time than to take advantage of that and spend it in the purpose of growing in Christ and serving and doing things that are so purposeful that you kind of have that time taken away when you do have responsibilities.
Yeah.
And
Can I take you back a little earlier?
Sure.
I mean, even when you were in college, because I know you told me how much you were such a part of community. In fact, I remember you telling me the story that you just put it out there and said, we're going to have a worship night.
Oh, yeah, that was awesome.
Walk us through that. Because I still remember what you told me about that, but I'd like to hear you say it.
That was so incredible. So in college, I mean, this is all, you're meeting people that you're living within walkable distance. So it was so easy to like go to another person's house. You could go to that person's house, go to class, go back to that person's house, go to the gym, go to that person's house, go back to your house. And like now it's like that's not super practical. But I had met a lot of my friends. Like God had always blessed me. Every single place I ever went, I've been, like every job I've ever had, every class, every organization I was a part of. And so I was living in this house, the thing that you're referring to, the worship night. I was living in a house downtown Grand Rapids. We had a couple neighboring houses where we knew the neighbors super well. We had each other's house codes, would kind of go back and forth between homes all the time. Sometimes we'd come home and our neighbors were sitting in our house and no one who actually lived there was in the house. And so one day we had decided, me and one of my roommates, we were like, let's just do a worship night. And so we put in like a group chat, hey, we're doing a worship night at like 7 tonight for anybody who wants to come. Here's the address. Here's the time. Bring whoever. 50 people showed up that night in our backyard. And like, we were like, what? Like, how did you even hear about this? And word just spread. And it was like something we had decided to do after church. So it was like 5 hours later, all of a sudden our backyard was filled and we all just hung out until, I don't even know, like the sun was set. We started a fire after that. And it was so incredible. And so going from that, I had then, like I said, I was working in HR and recruiting and felt like everything in life felt like such a distraction outside of my time in like ministry. And I was like,
explain what you mean by that. What was the distraction?
So working,
working
having a
was
job,
the distraction.
Yes.
For the community groups.
Yes. Like I was like, I just want to give 100% of my time to this. And so it's like, I would, do the 8 to 5 thing. And all I could think about was like, what was going to happen after work and what we could do. And
that's how strong community was.
Yes.
So I just want to talk about last summer for a minute, because you went to Grand Rapids almost every single weekend last summer.
Yeah.
And I remember you telling me that you didn't stay with the same person twice, and every weekend you were with a different friend group for like the whole summer. So community is really important to you. And it sounds like the reason why I wanted to talk about that 50 people that gathered in a few hours for worship, you kind of had that last week when you put the word out here.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So when I had moved here to Midland, it was the hardest decision that I ever had to make. I actually
talk about that, because it was about friend groups.
Yes. So I had interviewed here at Messiah. It was May of 2021, and long story short, there was a lot to it, but like was offered the job and I said no. And then it was...
Should we clarify? I offered that job?
Yes. Ed offered the job. I said no. Now we're here.
It's not some quasi somebody.
This guy right here.
I invited you to join the team and you said,
I said, that's
no.
okay. No, I took like 2 weeks to pray about it, think about it. You guys were so gracious. You were so gracious with just like allowing me that space. And I talked to so many people, prayed about it so much. And I think like I was just looking for one person to say like, stay. And I got that and was like, okay, yeah. Yep. I can't leave here. I didn't even want to apply here. And so,
so you turned it down?
I turned it down. And then, so again, that was in May of 2021. I believe it was August of 2021. So like 4 months later, I had spent all summer and was just like praying. And like, I'm like, Lord, I feel like you're calling me into ministry and I'm just waiting for something to open up here. because I love it here so much. And but every time I prayed, every time I had vision behind what I felt like God could be leading me into, it was within the context of this position and being here. And it's like, I remember I would just start dreaming. And all of a sudden in my mind, I was like picturing myself here. And then I would be like, no, I don't want this. Okay, dream up something else. Think of something else. And I remember I was like, okay, Lord, if you want me to come to Midland, like you'll have Ed call me. Like just have Ed call me out of the blue. You never called. And I was like, anything, like I'll take anything. But that never happened. And I was like, I think I just need to figure out why I'm still praying and processing through this. So I called you the night that we had the worship night, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And we talked, I think for like, it was a couple hours. And I remember I had the whole reason I had to leave because it was like, we're starting this thing in like 30 minutes. But yeah, I talked to you that night. And then we went through the whole process, and obviously now I'm here. You offered the position again, took it.
It hasn't been easy.
No,
it's been
it has
really
not.
hard for you the last couple of years.
So all that to say, it's like it was really hard leaving Grand Rapids, and the whole reason I didn't want to come here was because of what was built there. And I grew up here, and I knew what it was like, and I've heard the struggles of isolation and loneliness, and specifically for young adults. It's like Midland is known as a town for families, and you have people who either like kind of stay here their whole life or they move away and then they come back when they have a family. And so I was horrified. Like I do not do well with alone time at all. Like I think I need to be with people like 100% of the time, and I would be content doing that. So over the past couple years, it's been almost 3 years now. And I'm like, okay, God has blessed me every single place I've ever gone with friends. Surely that will happen here. And it has always happened immediately. And so I moved back here and was like, all right, my eyes are open. I'm looking for people in the church. I'm looking for people wherever I go, to the gym, to the grocery store, just like looking for young adults. And it's like, I see them, but I'm like, I don't know where you people go to hang out. Like where can I go to find you and like start or like build a friendship? And so I've just been praying so earnestly for this to happen. And over the past few years, there have been several attempts at starting something, tried starting something at Messiah itself. Then there were people that were brought in from the community and other churches to try to plan things. And I think those things, like God brought people in and out for seasons. And it was like every single time, I think there's probably been like 3 or 4 attempts now, or at least conversations with different groups of people that I'm like, okay, Lord, I think this can happen. Because one of the things I realized is like, I can't do this by myself. And so I had just been praying for that person to lead it with me. And so every time someone was brought into that circle, I was like, Lord, is this it? Like, could this be it? And
it wasn't.
It wasn't.
And wasn't there an attempt of just different churches kind of working together, and there's like representatives from different churches? And
yeah.
So that's another way to do this of partnering with other churches. How did that go?
I thought for a while that it was going to take off because I think we had some significant traction with things. And there was a while where it's like a few of us were like meeting very heavily. Like every week we would meet for a couple of hours, and people would be brought into that group and pulled out. And then eventually it was just like 3 of us representing me, Messiah, someone from another church, and then someone just representing like a group of young adults kind of thing. And he was passionate about it. And I think it existed well for its season. And I think
It wasn't very long though, was it?
No, it was probably about a year that we were meeting, and we did a couple of events. We did like a worship night. We did a spike ball tournament. We did a euchre night. There might have been a couple other things in there.
Wasn't there a planning challenge too? Like you would plan an event 3 months out or 6 months out.
Yeah, and it took and the way my mind worked. This is not to anybody else's fault, but I am a little bit more spontaneous, and I do not like planning. Any trip I've gone on, I want nothing to do with the planning. My friends always take care of that, and I just show up. And people are very gifted to do all of the planning and the execution and the strategizing. And they think of things that I'm like, I don't know if that matters a whole lot. But I will say, I think with that group, it felt a little bit like we'd plan like something as casual as spike ball, where I'm like, yeah, let's set it up next week. Like I have a net, and it's like, oh, like let's plan it like a few months out. And I'm like, I'm ready to go to today. And I think it's something that we can just show up to.
Yeah.
And from what I'm learning of young adults, it's like, we don't want the programs. We talked about this in some of our earlier podcasts of like the strategy, the organization. We don't need the mission statement. We don't need the vision. We don't need, like, we just want community and
together.
Organicness and natural. Yeah.
So we'll get to last night because I think it all pulled together for
Yes.
last night.
Yeah.
But I want to just highlight one more thing that I know we've talked about in the past, but maybe just highlight again. Part of that issue, you had shared that you wanted to do something, but you always felt like you had to ask permission, like from your parents' church.
Yeah.
Maybe just talk about that, because that's another element that I think you guys solved last night, which we'll get to in a minute. But talk about, as a Gen Z, what is it like to want to do something in a boomer church?
Yeah. You have to get permission to use the building. And I think that kind of takes a little bit of time, because you have to run through all of the
Committees.
the different committees and the people. And I mean, we're both on staff at a church, like your senior pastor, I'm on staff at the church. And it's like, when people do want to plan events, it's like, okay, who's going to be the staff person to represent them and be there? And can we make sure we have the doors unlocked? So there are a lot of things that I'm understanding now from this side that it's like, okay, those questions do have to be answered. But I mean, even from like not being on staff in a church and wanting to plan something, it's like we'd have this idea and it felt like it was just immediately squashed and it never could happen. It just ran up the chain and was forgotten about. And so it felt like you don't really have a place to meet. And I think too, though, like especially with young adults, and maybe, I don't know if this is something historically that has been something that all generations can identify with, or if it is just something that is Gen Z specific, but it seems like we want a neutral space to meet. And I think that has also been the key in all of this too, is like tried planning a Messiah like group and wanting people from the community to come. But it's like everybody scatters when you do that. And we've learned that from the community ministries as well.
Explain that a little bit more. What you mean when the church does something and it kind of has their name on it, like, oh, come to Messiah. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Then it's like, okay, if you are a believer, you are probably already at another church. And so it's like, why would you go to another church? It feels like you are like betraying your church, or you're saying like you have something better that we don't have. And it's a pride thing, I think. And so believers won't go to another believer's church. It's rare when they do.
Sad, but true.
Yeah. And then if you are a non-believer, if you don't know Jesus, why would you go to a church? If you're not looking for Jesus and all you want is community, it's like, I would imagine you would probably feel like they're going to try to convert you, or you're not welcome, or you might not know as much, or they're all going to be really close, like community, and you're the outsider walking in. And so tried that with Messiah, and that kind of felt like it just turned into like a huddle that we've talked about, you know.
Didn't go well.
No.
It's never gone well. I've been here 16 years, and I've watched time and time again, young adults would try, and it would just not go well.
Yeah. And I felt like it was like really great for like a season, and I've seen this with so many groups. This is not specific to young adults. And maybe this is just what I learned through, like, I was in InterVarsity Christian Fellowship in college, and just this cycle of you would start knowing nobody in a group and be like, okay, we're going to do new student outreach. You have me and another leader, and we're just going to go and invite. Everyone is a stranger. And then by the end of the semester or the academic year, these are the closest people to you. Like they've been through the tears of failing classes, of like stuff that's happening at home, being homesick. Like you've been through so much, and you're like, I can't wait to come back next year and return to this group. But InterVarsity is like, nope, you cannot be in the same group more than once. Find other, like, raise up leaders and then let them be leaders of their own groups. And it just creates this constant inviting culture. And so what I'm finding is, like, the groups that exist is like, that's exactly what happens is they find their group, but instead of seeking discomfort to invite others, they want to stay in that closed group. So it's always super amazing for that first season, but you have to be so intentional when you're taking the next step beyond that to do something for others as well.
So let's apply some things that we've talked about in the past, like the 5 stages of a church: missional, stable, consumerism. Boy, I almost see that playing out in what you just said. Like the first year, it's really amazing. Everybody's missional.
Yes.
And then what happens?
And then I think stability comes where you get, these are no longer strangers, like these are friends. You have your routines. You feel comfortable, like every week you feel comfortable inviting them beyond just like that small group Bible study to do things outside of that. And then I think it slips into consumerism when then you are like, when the thought of inviting a new person in, it's like this like anti-new people feeling of like, they're going to change the whole dynamic of our group. And I don't want that. Like, we have such a good thing going. We have such a good thing going where people can share and be vulnerable. And they don't want that new person to come in and change that.
Interesting. I think you're talking to every church in America that slides into that. That they found something amazing.
Yeah.
And they really like it. And now they're not so sure they want to bring new people into it because they know it's going to change the dynamic of the church.
Yeah. Right.
So you had kind of a microcosm of that. That was happening.
I guess, yeah.
Well, if you think about it, you were having that annually. And college, I think, provides an atmosphere, and InterVarsity was such that they would never let you get to that stable and consumerism.
Yeah.
They almost forced you right back into missional.
Yeah.
That you're going to have to join a new group where everybody's uncomfortable again.
And I think what I can speak to from, I mean, the groups that we started at Messiah is like we would meet and gather. And I think we kind of like turned into that. Like, I think everybody would still say like, yeah, like bring somebody great. But from me, like, I feel like the includer part of me, like I pay attention a lot to like the dynamics of people, and it stresses me out because I'm like, I see that person, that new person, and everybody here in this group is talking about something that happened in the past, and that person has no idea what is even being shared. And so I just feel this tension of like, I'm like, can we stop talking about like the past and like include this person, get to know this person, learn their story. And so I think our group kind of slid into that place of being like a really comfortable community that stopped being missional. And now it has kind of disbanded and no longer meets. So talking about the life stages of the church, preservation to death.
Yeah. You watched it.
Yeah.
But you watched it in a very shortened version. Almost like on an annual basis, you would watch this happen. That's interesting that they would talk about what happened before and it was excluding the person that was there.
That's a very common group dynamic thing. That's
Churches
not
do that.
specific to anybody. Yeah.
Churches do that. I
Yeah.
think so. I think you're really just talking a very shortened version of what's going on now. Okay, so scan ahead now. I find it even interesting when you talked about you would invite everybody, 50 people came. Now, you talked about church today, being in the church, like if you wanted to do something, you had to plan it out months because you had to get permission. So that 5-hour window turned into months, months of planning. And then you talked about when you're in a church that has a very short lifespan because you go from missional to consumer, or missional stable to consumer almost right away. Okay, so now let's bring us ahead.
Yeah.
You found another friend.
Yes.
And you guys started, just talk to us about what happened.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
So again, we'll back up a little bit more to go there. The group I was meeting with like a few months back, we kind of had one last meeting and kind of like acknowledged like this was really great for a season, but I don't think it's working anymore. And I was both like relieved, but also so like deeply saddened because I'm like, I felt like we let the planning get to us. And And I was just like, Lord, I don't understand. Like, I feel like you have the whole reason I went into ministry was for young adults. And when do you give up that dream, or when do you keep chasing after it? And I was asking that question a lot of like, do I just give up on this and do I go to something else? And about a month ago, so that was probably a month after this group had disbanded, and a month before now, I was meeting with a friend, Brooke. I so wish that she could be here today, and she does too, but I'll just have to speak on her behalf as best I can. But we were just meeting for coffee just because we had no intentions of starting anything. Like we were just meeting to talk. And I actually didn't know like a ton about Brooke before that. Like she was a barista at Journeys. We had gone to high school together, but she's like a couple years behind me, so we never really like interacted a whole bunch. So I was super excited to chat with her, and we were kind of just talking about everything that I just said of like young adults in the season that we're in, and we both went to college. I was at Grand Valley, she was at Northern, and we had such strong communities there. We both moved back to Midland, and we're just like, where is this at? And I think for a while we were just in this like maybe complaining mindset, and we're just like, where could it be? Where are they all? Like, we'd love to see it, and we've tried starting it and it's not happening. And after a while I was just like, I remember we both like said like started to talk, and we're like, no you go. And she was like, would you want to maybe open up your house to start something? And I was like, I was just going to ask if you wanted to start something. And so we both were like, okay, maybe this is something that the Lord is leading us into. And I kind of gave her the history of everything that had happened. And I'm like, I'm not ready to like throw away this dream of what I think could be for young adults. And I don't think that I'm speaking for just Midland either, because all of these people that are coming up, these pastors that we have month after month, we just had a group this past week, and we got to share the dream of young adults. And there was a lot of conversation following that of like, churches need this. Like, we don't have any young adults in our church. And so this is not specific to Messiah.
No, it's not.
So I'm hoping a lot of people can relate to this and learn from maybe something.
So talk about Brooke for just a moment. I mean, in a good way.
Well, yeah, there's nothing bad to say about Brooke.
Brooke came from another church. Was she struggling with the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, she has a group that she meets with, like a group of young women. But we really just we felt like God wanted to create a space for this to be much bigger than just what could happen in your church.
So the decision when you talked about doing something, you had to find a neutral place.
Yes. And
That's
that was
key.
the other thing.
Okay,
We were like,
talk about the neutral place.
We needed a neutral place because we were like, we cannot have it at a church because no other believers or like from other churches will come. And we talked about like, I was like, do you want this to be something that is for believers only or for the unbeliever? Because I think that was also, along with planning from this past group, that was also a question that we just circled again and again and again and again.
I'd like to pause you.
Okay.
Because I think in the whole conversation, what you just said in a couple sentences, I want you to go back and reiterate, even if you're saying the same thing again.
Yeah.
Because we talked about meeting in the church and the challenges of meeting in the church. So you went to a neutral place and tell the why again, because I hope everybody's really listening.
Yeah.
That any pastor or anybody in a church who's like, how come we're struggling to get young adult ministry going on?
Yeah.
You had to go to a neutral place. Talk about that one more time, why that's so important.
You have to ask who it's for. And so if you want it to be for believers only at your church only, do it at your church. If you want it to be for believers only, but from other churches, I don't know if you would do it at your church. I don't know. You could do it in someone's house. But if you want this to be something for the community and for the unbeliever, it has to be in a place that is neutral for people to feel comfortable coming. And so that was something that Brooke and I had talked about early on, because for me, I'm like, I want this to be for the unbeliever, but bring the believers along so that we can all engage missionally. And I was like, if that is not what you are also wanting, then like this is not going to work out, because we're just going to be fighting this tension of do we do like a worship night? Do we do a game night, and do we pray at the game night, and do we like what is happening at every single event? Because I think that's what we were struggling with in past groups of like, we'd be like, oh, it'd be so fun to have like volleyball. And then it was like, okay, and then we'll have worship music playing, and then we'll end the night in worship, and then we'll do a Bible study. And I was like, okay, I don't like the whole bait and switch idea. Like,
Right.
we want to be forthright with what we're happening, what's going to be happening at these events, and people can choose if they would like to participate in that, and you are totally welcome to. But we're not going to disguise a Bible study with volleyball. And so we want it to be approachable for people.
Okay, we're going to unpack that a little bit more, because I think we have to keep applying this to churches. You said something just a few minutes ago that you wanted it to be for people in the community, but the church is invited too. That's a huge shift for a church.
Yes.
Most churches do what?
They will have church activities that is for the people in their church.
Right.
And yeah, you could bring somebody from
Okay, but
the
they really
community.
don't mean it.
Right.
I mean, it'd be like, oh, if you want to bring somebody, then they're going to have to act like us and kind of do what we do. But you said something very different. Say it one more time, that when you formed this group, or for last night, your whole design missionally was to do it for who?
For the community.
And who was invited?
Believers, the
Yeah,
church.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
So let's do it for the community, invite the church, not let's do it for the church and invite the unbeliever.
Yes.
Okay,
Which
so
changes everything.
It does.
And I would we're going to do a podcast about this too, because I think that shift changes how you market things, what you title it, where it's located, who's involved, who you're inviting. It changes everything.
So I think everybody has to decide, don't they? Like, who are you marketing, or who are you targeting? And I think churches fall into the trap of it's really for us. And we're going to invite other people to join us. But I'm not sure that's really what their hope is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I know before we get into, we're going to have to wrap this up pretty quick, but we've got a
We
whole
haven't even
nother-
shared what happened last
I know
night.
we didn't. I know, but we'll wait till next time to really share that.
Yeah.
So we'll maybe pick this up again next week, because I think there's a lot more to share. But
Yeah.
but I don't want to leave everybody hanging in terms of what we just talked about. So when you were getting some communication back, you were targeting the unbeliever and then inviting the church along, and you told me that you had heard from some people that told you flat out, I'm not a believer, am I welcome?
Yeah.
So maybe just walk through, because that was affirming that you were hitting your target audience.
Yeah. So we, all of this happened so seamlessly, which I would actually really like to unpack that. We'll probably do that in the next episode. But really briefly, it's like we threw a video out there. Me and Brooke went and filmed in front of the place that we were meeting, which I guess we didn't even talk about either.
We didn't talk about any of that.
It's neutral ground. We'll cover that too.
It's a cliffhanger for next week.
Right. So we filmed in front of the place that we were going to be meeting and just said like, hey, this is what we're starting. If you're a young adult, if you're longing for community, we're going to do board games. We're going to do worship nights. We're going to do prayer. We're going to do movie nights. We're going to do food. Like you're invited, like come kind of thing. And so the video got like 2,000 views, like a ton of people sharing it. We created a Facebook group for people to join, and we have close to 100 people now in the group. And that video was posted, I think, like 2 weeks ago now, maybe less than that.
And how long did it take to get...
One day.
Okay, almost like your 5 days when you were back in Grand Rapids.
Yeah,
that you
like
would
5
get the word
hours
out, and it was 5 hours. You had
Yeah.
one day, and it reached over 1,000 people.
Yeah. And so we had people joining the group, and in order to join the group, you have to answer 3 questions. We just wanted to kind of like field who was coming in. So one was just like agreeing to like Facebook rules of like, you're not going to bully people. You're going to be nice. You're going to be kind. And then there was like, what do you believe kind of thing? Like, what do you identify with most? And we had like, I believe in Jesus as my Lord and Savior. I like other, but I'm curious, or none at all, but I'm looking for community kind of thing. So just giving people an option. And that was also a really intentional question, because I think the way that we had it phrased at first was, do you believe in Jesus as your Lord and Savior? Yes or no? And I was like, I don't want people to feel like if they answer no, they can't come. So let's just create, what do they identify with, and list all of these things. And then like age range. Cause we also, when you have like an 18-year-old in a group and someone who is single in like their 50s, like it doesn't mix well.
Didn't you say you had someone in their 50s?
There were a few.
Ask if they could be part of the young adults. Yeah, that's a little weird.
Yeah. So we just wanted to protect the space. And so we had probably like 10 people mark at least like either other or none. And then a couple people had message saying like, hey, I'm not a believer. I don't have any like religious affiliation, but I love community building and I'm lonely. Is it okay that I come? And I was like, okay, this is it. Like, this is happening. This is
the why.
Yes. Yeah. And it's just like that.
And it wasn't a bait and switch. It was just, we want to welcome you into community.
Yeah. And I told every single one of them, like, you are totally welcome, and we will always be like upfront about what we're doing, and you can decide whether or not you participate. So I think the beauty of it is just being unashamedly like who you are. And this whole time leading up to like the start of this group, I have just been like praying and praying. And the thing that like remains consistently clear that I hear from the Lord is like no agenda. Like every time I start to think of like, we need more leaders, we need training, we need A, B, C, D, F, the whole list of things, I just am like reminded like no agenda. And when you show up and you can be unashamedly who you are and who God created you to be and who you love, and you love the Lord and you serve the Lord, those conversations came up. Every single person last night, every single person like asked why we were doing this. And it's like, we shared at the beginning, and even after that, they were like, so why did you do this? Why did you start this up?
Okay, we're going to pause on that, because I think that's a great place to start next week. People still don't really know exactly what it was that you guys did last night, so we're going to talk more about that. But what would you recommend to churches, based on what you just learned and what you just said? What would you recommend to churches?
I think just start something, put something on the calendar, start small. And I think even from last night, prior to that, like Brooke and I were like, if you and I, like, we have to set this date, because if we don't, it won't happen. And if we show up and it is just you and I, great. Then we'll set the next date and we'll try it again and we'll try it again. So just start small. And if it is a flop, like, the Lord will use it. You have to start somewhere.
That's great. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Beyond the Breakwater, a podcast of Elevate Community Ministries. Don't let the conversation stop here. You can email us at hello@beyondthebreakwater.org. We would love to chat with you, answer questions, plan a visit, and help you take your next step. We'll see you next week.